Welcome to episode 2 of the How Good Is Your Overwatch League team series. This time we'll be discussing the off-season as well as the potential of the Atlanta Reign. If you're new to this series and how it works, it's essentially a team preview. I highlight off-season moves, followed by a team evaluation, then we end with some general predictions as to where the team might finish in their conference and overall standings. Simple enough, right? Let's get started then. My opening statement for the Atlanta Reign is that they're an interesting case. They could still generally be very formidable, but to what extent, you know? They may be a grand finals runner-up and everything, but a lot of key players have come and gone, giving this roster a relatively new feel. They certainly do have some good things going for themselves. I think that playoffs are certainly a possibility for this franchise yet again, but there's definitely no guarantee this time, because compared to what they had at the end of last year, there's a lot more questions that are going to need some answers. To find out why that is, we have to rewind a bit with a recap of Atlanta's offseason. On the player side of it, they lost multiple significant pieces. The Reign said goodbye to Masa and Iris in free agency, but also traded Pelican away to the Houston Outlaws. In one swift strike, half of their starting lineup from 2021 disappeared. Each of these guys had unique talents that were big for this Reign team, and they were a huge reason why they made it as far as they did. Masa provided the veteran leadership, ult tracking, and general consistency over a 3-year span that is not easy to replicate. Meanwhile, Iris had a breakout year where he rose to the top as a role star level flex support. His Baptiste and Ana put in a ton of work. Letting a high potential player like him walk in free agency is a bit scary to say the least, but honestly, him, as well as Masa leaving, has nothing on what is arguably the biggest loss not just of the Reign's offseason, but in general for all teams. Trading away Pelican is heartbreaking. The reigning Rookie of the Year and former MVP candidate put up some historic numbers. His flexibility and constant hard carry moments played a pivotal role in Atlanta's rise to the top. Top-notch superstars are not easy to come by, but are an absolute necessity to be successful in this league. Moving forward without somebody like Pelican will be a challenge to say the least, and it's going to be the main storyline that everybody talks about with this Atlanta team. Oh, and before I forget, while his playtime varied, Edison was not re-signed either, which is a bit sad because his potential was never quite reached on the Reign, but that does kind of make it less of a big deal in a way. Yeah, they lose out on a good tracer and talented hit scan, but they preferred Kai and Pelican anyway, so not a huge deal I suppose. This was the least impactful offseason release by far. But with these 4 departures in mind, that left the Reign with holes at support and DPS, but that's not all they would go on to lose, as Coach Unter left for the LA Gladiators, which is a major deal. Unter commonly is regarded as a top-notch coach who makes the teams he's a part of insanely better, and the results definitely speak for themselves with Atlanta, do they not? A guy who instantly solved the team's prior coaching issues is now gone just like that. Thankfully for Atlanta fans, that's where the drops come to an end at least. Needless to say though, the Reign went through numerous big moves that could have an effect on the team for years to come even. To attempt to make up for all these losses, the Reign are going to turn to a combination of upcoming talent and veterans. To repair their support line, they went with former American Tornado duo OG and Ultraviolet. While there is no guarantee that this new duo can play at the level of Masa and Iris, they're definitely a promising pair of replacements. They're young and filled to the brim with potential. OG in particular was considered to be Overwatch League caliber years before he was even old enough to join. His impact was felt all the way back in 2019, and he has remained relevant ever since. He possesses a balanced hero pool with above average playmaking for a main support. What else could you possibly ask for with a rookie prospect? He checks off all of the boxes and arguably has even more potential than Masa. It's scary to think what this team might do without their leader Masa, but OG generally might end up being an upgrade. But his partner in crime, Ultraviolet, is no slouch either. Since his arrival on American Tornado back in the day, he has widely been considered one of the better Western flex supports in all of Tier 2. But again, due to his young age, he never really got a shot at the Overwatch League up until now. And boy has this been a long time coming, because much like OG, Ultraviolet can play multiple heroes consistently. I personally have always been a big fan of his Zen, but he's not to be underestimated on any of the other typical flex support characters. OG and Ultraviolet have played together for quite some time, so you can expect their synergy to be on point. And best of all, They have the confidence and experience because they dominated North American contenders for a ridiculous amount of time as they racked up multiple championships and a gauntlet first place finish. It's gonna feel like something is gone and just not right even in some cases without Masa and Iris, but this young and upcoming duo might have what it takes to make it feel like they never left. There's reason to feel confident in these rookies, no doubt about it. It's just a matter of fulfilling their immense potential now. Speaking of potential, that gets us on to the DPS. At Flex DPS, the Reign went with Nero, who already has great synergy with some of the other members of this team. But of course, on paper, a lot of people will consider this a downgrade no matter what, since it is difficult to envision Nero playing at the level of Pelican. Nero, in my opinion, is genuinely a good player who gets too much hate, but this is a monumental task. And I can't help but kind of feel bad for the guy. First he joins the Shock to replace Rascal, and now this. Dude cannot catch a break no matter where he signs. He faces giant expectations no matter where he ends up signing, and one can't help but wonder if he'll be able to do enough. He certainly does have the flexibility needed to thrive in this role, but Pelican was so great at completely taking over a match. He was a true X factor that is near impossible to replace. If the Reign want to make this work, the other damage dealers are going to have to pick up the slack all together in a combined effort. This includes the newly acquired Venom, who previously went by the name Sigma, if that sounds a bit more familiar to some of you. This young star is shrouded in mystery. His pro career prior to joining Atlanta was incredibly short, but even so, people could not stop talking about this guy. In the couple of months that he spent competing, he was a killing machine on Tracer, and while his general hero pool is a bit more mysterious, there is reason to believe that his Tracer is likely Overwatch League caliber due to how dominant he was, and Tracer might be all he needs to play, so fair enough, right? Venom low-key might sneak up on some people. He is a massive wildcard player who very well could be a major difference maker. If there's one new player to keep an eye on with this Atlanta squad, it's definitely him. Moving into the coaching acquisitions, the Reign promoted their analyst Danny to a full-time coaching gig. He's been with this team since the very beginning, so obviously they're quite fond of him over there, and they consider him to be a valuable asset. But just like with Nero, he definitely has some major shoes to fill. Unter was excellent, and carrying on without him could be difficult no matter who the Reign decide to replace him with. I for one believe that the Reign's coaching staff took a step in the wrong direction this offseason. It finally felt like they solved that ongoing coaching issue with Unter, but now, I don't really know. At this point, the question marks are back in full force, and it's going to take a solid performance to show that everything is okay. With upgrades and or downgrades aside, that just about sums up how the Reign's offseason went. They got a couple of promising pieces, but in return for quite a few noteworthy losses. It was a pretty wild offseason, and I'd say that from a general standpoint, they did just okay. For all the stuff they lost, I think their compensation could have been a lot worse. But obviously, with all the losses they had, especially with Pelican, it could have been a lot better too. So now how about we move into a team evaluation with all of this in mind. For starters, the Atlanta Reign's roster is still pretty decent. In my opinion, they definitely look worse compared to last year, but they still have pretty much everything needed to potentially make the playoffs. Thinking about this role by role, I still generally like their tank line. Gator and Hawk, they showed great improvement last year, and they surely feel a lot more trustworthy compared to what happened in the previous offseason. And with both of them already showing the ability to play without each other in previous seasons, I think they'll both do okay in some sort of single tank meta. I especially do like the direction that Hawk is heading in, as he played at a very high level last year and was arguably robbed of a Role Star award. I still have some questions about him and Gator's flexibility in some instances, but they mostly have everything covered. As for the damage dealers, this still remains a strong point of the team's identity. Venom is full of promise and could one day develop into something dangerous. Then you have Kai and Nero, who have both demonstrated great reliability throughout the years. Nero for usually putting on a good show with projectile characters, and Kai for being an all-around hit scan and sniper god. If anything though, Kai might go back to his Valiant days in terms of performances now that Pelican is out of the big picture. He might get relied on even more. Somebody has to step up, and Kai seems like the most likely candidate. But while there's a lot to talk about with this new DPS rotation, no Pelican is a deep concern, and I'm genuinely genuinely curious to see how they play without him. Losing out on a generational talent like that is so hard to overcome. He basically became the team's identity and the guy they relied on over and over again. This isn't some ordinary player they said goodbye to. His flexibility was elite and was already one of the top players in the league during his first year. He might have been the youngest guy on the roster, but he definitely did not act like it with how much he was leading by example. He was the thing that pushed this Reign team into title contender status, and now that he's gone, it's tough to say if they'll ever recover. That's how I feel from like a comparison standpoint, but in general, again, the Reign DPS line isn't bad at all. Now finally we move on to the support line, and while they have no backups, this is probably the place to feel the best about if you're an Atlanta fan. Iris and Masa were fantastic, but the combined might of the new rookies could lead to an eventual upgrade. Like I said before, these two have the flexibility, playmaking, and championship DNA boxes already checked off. They should be competitive with a decent amount of support lines in the league right off the bat if they fulfill their potential. This rotation is not bad at all, but the issue is, it's also not amazing either, and if the Reign want to go back to being a title contender, that could pose a big time problem. There definitely are some downgrades like I talk about with the players, but also another huge thing is again that coaching staff and how they might be worse off as well. The threat of coaching being a problem is very much real, and unless Danny is a better replacement than I'm giving him credit for, or Sephi is just this Overwatch 2 mastermind, there's a real possibility that this team sees some sort of decline. It's not entirely fair to the Atlanta Reign, since it's difficult to maintain a Grand Finals level roster, and they have to deal with all the expectations now that they did come in second last year. But fair or not, this is going to be the general consensus or outlook of their roster. They suffered too many heavy losses to stay at that true championship aspiration level. I'd hate to be negative, especially because the Reign usually end up proving me wrong, but there's a lot going on in front of them. They face a bunch of tough roadblocks that they've got to break through if they wish to play at the same level as last year. The future is uncertain, and that warrants concern for any Atlanta Reign fan out there. Is what they have enough? Or are all of the big-time haters out there going to laugh in their faces when they inevitably come up short? I guess we'll find out soon enough. In the meantime, how about some preseason expectations? With all my thoughts in mind from this video, I feel like the Reign could finish anywhere from 13th through 7th place in the overall standings. In terms of my conference expectations, I'll go as high as 4th and as low as 8th. Atlanta are a very strange team. If everything clicks, they'll be respectable. I genuinely believe that playoffs or maybe even a potential like dark horse contender status are possible despite all of the changes. But if there are issues, then they might just be okay. That's the thing. North America is going to be tight this year. With New York moving over and a bunch of teams showing improvement throughout the offseason, it's going to be a much tougher battle. In all likelihood, there's going to be more 50-50 matches, or even games where they're considered to be the underdogs. A fair number of teams caught up to them skill-wise, and it would not be surprising to see them go just a couple of games over or even under 500. Their best hope of making the playoffs, if they end up struggling, is to capitalize on the weaker parts of their schedule, then win a couple of those 50-50 matches and play well when it counts in the mid-season tournament. And while that sounds like a tough road to travel down, this group does have what it takes to make it happen. It all depends on how they deal with the lack of Pelican plus Unter. At the end of the day, their playoff hopes might be out of their control. It seriously might be up to some of their opposition out there who either lives up to expectations or ends up massively underperforming. It's a scary but also exciting moment to be an Atlanta fan. They are one of the teams on the spectrum that could easily go in either direction, where they might massively underperform or overperform. From here on out, it's on them to take care of business. The talent is there. The synergy is there. But do they have the brains, star power, and coaching to make another run? It's only a matter of time until we find out. All we can do now is wait and see what happens. But until then, that's where we're going to be leaving things for right now. So now I turn it over to you. What do you think? Are the Reign bound for a down year, or are they going to prove the haters wrong and have another above average season? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe if you want to stay up to date with this series. We've still got 18 teams to go. And until next time, this is ATP, signing out. Peace.